The world is changing. We're in transition. Does anybody have a sense of where this is? Just answer for yourself in your mind. My friend in Alaska says it looks a lot like home. This is not Alaska. This is Cape Cod in Massachusetts, just a month ago in December. All of us in this room know about these transitions, like this one in our climate, and this one in our economy, and this one in our democracy. At the Chorus Foundation, we believe that these three transitions and these three crises are linked. The crisis in ecology exemplified by climate change, the crisis in economy exemplified by inequality, and the crisis in democracy exemplified by disengagement, disempowerment, and disenfranchisement. We have to work in all three of these domains at the same time, centering race and equity. We have to recognize that the transition from this system to this system is not a question of technology or human capital or money, but a question of power. Who has control? Who benefits? Who decides? In the environmental world, we traditionally talk about stopping this extraction, but we need to stop this extraction. And this one, the extraction of our labor, our productive capacity, where workers in this factory are treated and valued no differently from workers in this factory. We have a lot of ways of looking and naming what we're fighting against. In fact, we're quite sophisticated at understanding and describing the bad. And there's a lot of bad out there. But we also need to name what we're fighting for. This word cloud is the mission, vision, and value statements of our core grantees. And you can see what communities value and what they're building towards. It's this twin work of fighting the bad and building the new that is just transition. A watershed moment for just transition was the Paris Climate Agreement. This moment was important, but it should be approached with caution because we are seeing both the popularization of this term as well as its potential co-optation. It is not just about the clean energy economy, nor the transition of workers. We suggest at its core, it's about building power. A transition will surely happen, but will it be centered on justice? If you want the answer to be yes, we need to build power in three domains. Political power, the power to make collective decisions both at the formal governance level but also through more informal community agreements. Economic power, the power to control the means of production, to control our labor, to own our land. And cultural power, the power to control our story, to shape our imaginations of what our communities should and could look like. The just transition has to center power. Addressing power for whom? With expertise and knowledge coming from communities, focusing on process, not just policies, and working in a way that is very foreign to philanthropy, having power flow from the bottom up. The challenge in philanthropy is that we have to move from focusing on issues. And don't get me wrong, our grantees work on a lot of issues, but focusing on process, the human process about who has control and who has power. Where are funds allocated and by whom? How are organizations linked and learning from each other? What type of work are funded? And an issue I've come to investigate more most recently, how are people surviving our movements? At the Chorus Foundation, we work in 4 communities: Eastern Kentucky, Buffalo, New York, Richmond, California, and Alaska, where we are focusing primarily on Native communities and Native-led organizations. In each community, we provide long-term, 8 to 10 years of general operating support to core partners. In addition, in each place, we fund an ecosystem of organizations working together towards the just transition. And this is augmented by key capacities and networks shared across these 4 places, plus interesting experiments that can inform our collective work together. But it is important to understand our work at Chorus as part of a process. When we began, we asked ourselves, what have we been doing, and what is the next best thing we can do? We continue to experiment. I've talked about long-term general operating support and funding ecosystems. We try to align all of our resources, including our C3 funding with our ability to invest, plus our founders' ability to support C4s, 527, independent expenditures, candidates, and ballot initiatives. And we can't forget our non-financial resources. We try to operate in as transparent a way as possible, having all of our conversations from investments to communication strategies and so on a Slack account open to our grantees. And we continue to experiment with how to democratize grant-making decisions. But I want to pause for a second and say we can't forget to have fun. Grant-making is not fantasy football, a game of statistics, imagined teams, and reconfigured matches. It is real life governed by human interactions, and this needs to be animated by joy, sprinkled with a little bit of dancing and booze. So what do we, philanthropy, and the people in this room need to do now? Experiment. Ask yourself the simple question, what one thing could I be doing differently and better? Do it and ask the question again. Recognize when you've made mistakes and learn from them. Don't ignore them. Get out of your office and into communities and start seeing what's going on. A lot is happening today, right now, and that work needs our support to get to scale, to move faster, to experiment. Investigate whether your processes are getting in the way of supporting good work, and change them. And start acting with others. We ask our partners on the ground to do this, but it's so easy for us not to do this ourselves. So I'll leave you with two simple questions. What is your role in building power with communities rather than keeping power in your hands? And yes, you do have power. It doesn't just reside with your trustees. And who will your partners be in this work? Think about who you're accountable to, not just to your internal accountability structures. One last thing, and I'm going to steal from one of our grantees, Christine Cordero from the Center for Story-Based Strategies. We're going to be doing new things, and those things are going to make us feel uncomfortable. Stick with the uncomfortable. The one thing I know is if we stick with the status quo, nothing new is going to happen. Thank you.